Could you please come back soon? Good morning, all. Good morning.
Morning. Hi there, ladies. You okay?
Baruch Hashem.
Good morning.
Let's switch off that.
First question ready for you.
We're all ears. Go ahead.
Okay, Havdalah. Can you make Havdalah with any alcohol, or can you make it with any non-alcohol? My father-in-law once advised us that you could make it with water.
I've heard.
And I thought that was controversial.
Oh, wow. Great question.
The great Ralph Morris, of course.
Of blessed memory, Kenai Nahara. Wow, he's a special man, I must tell you. Kenai Nahara. It's good to mention Ralph. Kenai Nahara. But 1 second. Malcolm, you're going to say something? It's a good question. I like it. Havdalah, could you make it on any other beverage outside of wine? Come on, you got to say it's a good question.
The answer is yes, you can.
You can?
Yes.
What are the choices? What are the options? Whatever you want?
No, not necessarily whatever you want. There has to be some choices. But I have heard in the past that you can make it on water if you're stuck.
I'm not sure about the water part, but there is a concept of when the person doesn't have wine available, second best is the beverage that is most used in that country. So the country's beverage, for example, if it's a well-used beverage to have tea, especially in this country, it's considered permissible to use tea as a second option. In America, I think they say it's Coca-Cola. In some places like Ireland, I think it's beer. But water, I'm not sure about.
Guinness.
Oh, there we go. Is Guinness kosher, yeah? It's not got anything mixed in.
Yeah. Milk.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the idea, though. It has to be an honorable beverage, but it doesn't have to be only wine. Although wine is the drink of choice. And that's true for Havdalah. When it comes to other things, like Kiddush, it's a little bit more complicated. I think usually the answer is no, it has to be wine. But when it comes to Havdalah, then there's room to use other kinds of beverages, providing that it's a well accepted drink.
I guess that's why they brought in water. He said water because, some people are partial to water and tea is just flavored water.
Oh, interesting. I would check up before I had water for Havdalah. Although if someone has no wine, no water, nothing else, one should still make Havdalah. And we say it in Mariv, and we say a little one-liner when Shabbos is over, Baruch HaMavda ben Kodesh L'Chayil, to at least verbally pronounce that there's a differentiation, which is what Havdalah actually means. There's a difference between Shabbos and non-Shabbos days. Although a person ideally shouldn't eat or drink before having Havdalah if they're able to make it over a cup on that night. If it has to be delayed, one can make Havdalah until Tuesday morning. But that you don't have to fast until then. But if a person is able to make Havdalah, one should refrain from eating and drinking until after the Havdalah. So let's say it's going to be an hour or two before you can get to a cup of wine. For the hour or two, one should not eat and drink unless you're still in a meal from Shabbos, like Shalosh Shudah sometimes will last over past the end of Shabbos. So one can continue eating until it benches. And after benching, now you take it, and then you don't eat until after Havdalah. Great question, though. Okay. Any other good question,
please?
Please, bevakasha.
Shavua Tov. I was wondering, because I was in this situation where I wasn't sure whether I'll have enough wine for the Havdalah.
Yes.
And then I was wondering, will I be able to go out, get it from somewhere, come back and do Abdallah, or what? What do you do?
So the answer to that is yes, no problem. You could say the Havdalah in the Atachonin Bracha, which is in the Amida of Mariv. And if you haven't said that, you can say the Baruch HaMavdal, at which point you can do whatever it takes to you don't have to do, you can do malachot, you can do work on which you can't do on Shabbos. But again, one should, if able to, should refrain from eating and drinking until after hearing Havdalah. Interestingly, it's very appropriate for this coming Shabbos, where we'll do exactly that. We're only going to make Havdalah in the amalgamation in Kiddush, which is going to have an extra paragraph of Havdalah in it. But we have to light the candles before Kiddush. So how do you light the candles if you haven't made Havdalah? And the truth is, every Havdalah is that way. How do you light the Havdalah candle before you've made Havdalah? And of course, you can't light a fire on Shabbos, but you need Havdalah candle lit in order to make Havdalah. So one should always say, Baruch HaMavdil ben Kodesh l'chol before making Kiddush. Before making Havdalah, that way you can light the candles. This year it'll be Hamavdil ben Kodesh LeKodesh, differentiating between one holiness and a lower level of holiness between Shabbos and Yom Tov, which are different levels of holiness. Amazingly, here's a little bit of Chassidus, Kabbalah to throw into it. We talk about levels of holiness. Another word for holy is godly. So the holier something is, the more it's in tune, in line with Hashem, more of Hashem's expression it is. So a holy person isn't somebody who doesn't eat or drink, because that doesn't make a person holy. A holy person is somebody who is transparent and allows Hashem to shine through them, almost like a clear glass window where you can't even see that there's a glass there because it just lets whatever's behind it shine through. That's a holy person. Hashem is shining through that individual. You see such a person on the street, you see, oh, look how wonderful Hashem is. The person is reflection straight up of Hashem. That's holiness. So the holier something is, the less it's noticeable of itself, which means that the more holy it is, the more refined, the more sensitive one has to be to appreciate it. So the coarser, the less refined the person is, the less they will appreciate holiness, which means as human beings, we can't appreciate straight up godliness, holiness on its own. We look for holiness the way it can be expressed in tangible stuff. So a holy item is that sort of bridge where it's an item, it's a thing, we can touch it. You can go to the Western Wall and touch the stone, but we know it's a very holy stone. There's a lot of godliness expressed in this stone, but it's touchable, it's tangible. Yom Tov compared to Shabbos, Shabbos is at a higher level, but that's why we have to be much more refined to appreciate it. Yom Tov is perhaps not as high, but it's a much closer to the human side. And therefore, the celebration of Yom Tov is much more pronounced than it is on Shabbos. Equally, when you have the first night of Shabbos, Friday night, compared to Shabbos afternoon, which one feels more holy? When you feel the greatness of Shabbos, Friday night, it's got something special to it. And then Shabbos morning, Shabbos afternoon, it slowly is less tangible. Not because it's less holy, but because it's deeper and holier. The Baal Shem Tov, the great tzaddikim, they would be on the highest level on Shabbos afternoon at Shal Shudas. But for most people, we can feel the Kedusha. It's much more relatable when it's that less holy, but more feelable, more easier to get in touch with. Interesting idea. So when it comes to Yom Tov, we celebrate Yom Tov in a very physical way. We make sure there's good food. We make sure there's new clothing. We make sure there's good wine. All these things are important for Yom Tov. It's a mitzvah. Why so? Because Yom Tov has to be much more relatable than even a Shabbos. So this weekend coming up. We have Shabbos and Yom Tov next door each other, and we can appreciate the difference of getting an extra Yom Tov, 2 days Yom Tov in this world. By the way, it's a mitzvah to celebrate Yom Tov not only with holiness, but also to get yourself stuff, things. Where it says for a man, one should have good wine and good meat for Yom Tov. And for a woman, one should get new clothing and new jewelry. For children, it's toys and nash. In the Gemara talks about having, they would have roasted nuts. I guess that was their form of sweets back in the day. Or roasted, when it wasn't Pesach, roasted kernels of wheat. I guess the nuts was the Pesach version of that. But that sort of idea where we put ourselves into a place where we have nice things to get us into the frame of mind to jumpstart a meaningful Yom Tov. How are we doing, Yashin? Have we answered the question?
Yeah, beautiful.
Okay. We're going to talk about what's on the calendar. Oh boy, there's a loaded calendar. And then we're going to talk about what's in the Parshah. And then we're going to go back to talk about something on Pesach. Okay? So what's going on the calendar first? Please unmute yourself if you have any questions or any comments to make along the way. But I'm going to start off with a Chabad highlight. Yeah, I've got to do that. I'm sorry. It's just, I love it. This week, Tuesday night, Wednesday, is the birthday of the Rebbe. Okay? So the birthday of the Rebbe would be the 120th year. But on this day, the 11th of Nisan, we mark the Rebbe's birthday because we already spoke about it. Of course, we already spoke about the importance of celebrating birthdays in general. And there was a birthday campaign in which the Rebbe encouraged people to know your Jewish birthday. Don't just know it, celebrate it. Make it a special day. And the Rebbe instructed people to have a birthday party. You had these Hasidic old people, old men with long white beards, and they invite their friends around for a birthday party. Because you have to celebrate your birthday. It makes no difference what sort of Talmud Chacham and great scholar you are. It's the day Hashem invested you into the world. We've got to make a celebration. You've got to make a birthday party. Of course, it's a day of introspection, a special day. And the Rebbe spoke about his own birthday, which is always very close to Pesach. The 11th of Nisan is 4.5 days away from Pesach, right? It was always a stress, to be able to figure out what can we do special to make it, of course, not just a party, but do encourage people to do mitzvahs whilst it's so close to Pesach. And of course, the answer is help people get ready for Pesach. That's a mitzvah, and it's not going to distract from Pesach. It encourages Pesach. So I remember in my yeshiva days, we were very, very involved in which we would have mitzvah tank parades. Imagine not just one mitzvah tank or 10 mitzvah tanks, 50, 60, 70 mitzvah tanks lined up in a long parade, driving into Manhattan with a police motorcade and the sirens and all. And then we would spread out and literally tens of thousands of people would be engaged personally. How was Pesach preparations? Do you need some handmade shmura matzah? Do you have everything you need? And the connections that were made in that one day. It wasn't even 24 hours. It was like 12 hours. But it was so enormous. It still goes on every year. And the idea is it's a day that there's good energy. We all know that, I'm sure we've mentioned many a time, the Rebbe gave a lot of goodness to the world. And the day that we celebrate his birthday is the day we're celebrating that goodness. So celebrating on the day isn't just to say thank you, but celebrating on the day is to capitalize, to catch the energy of the day and allow it to encourage us to do more good. Well, that's Tuesday night, Wednesday, 11th of Nisan. This is a big day. It's a day that we can think of at least one or two other Yiddish people or fellow humans. Reach out to them and say to them, is there anything I can do to help? How's your Pesach coming along? What's going on? Is there anything that we can do together to make your Pesach a better Pesach, or do a mitzvah together? Better still, that we can do together to help somebody else even. That's 3 people, and the domino effect, the ripple effect. That's Tuesday night, Wednesday, and the Chabad calendar. Get involved if you're up to it. It's a fantastic opportunity. But, of course,
Is
this
there something
Shabbos...
online? There'll be something online on Tuesday night? Or?
There'll be loads. Look around. They'll be in Hebrew and English and French and every language. You name it, it's there. And there'll be celebrations all around the world. Of course, with everyone Zooming these days, it's much easier to tap in. But of course, that's just our own inspiration. But the idea is really to take our own inspiration and spread it outwards, share it. That's really the theme. The theme is not just to inspire ourselves, but inspire ourselves to inspire others. Very much what the Rebbe encouraged us and expected us to step up to do. And it's an opportunity that we should take up. Okay. Along the same lines, Shabbos HaGadol is this Shabbos. What's Shabbos HaGadol? So famously, the Rav in a regular shul would have 2 main drashas a year. 2 main drashas a year. Nowadays, probably the biggest drasha is called Nidre. But the drasha of Shabbos HaGadol, the Shabbos before Pesach, was traditionally the time where they would teach the laws of Pesach to make sure that everyone knows what to do. Now, the truth is, Pesach laws, especially Seder night, but in general Pesach laws, are they're not simple. There's so many details, and they're so intricate. A lot of them are technical and hard to remember. How much matzah do you have to have? What happens if you made a mistake? What happens if you found a piece of cake, God forbid, on the Seder night? What should you do? I mean, there are answers to all these questions, but there's a lot of halachas. Nowadays, there's many simplified podcasts. You can look it up online. There are so many different articles that are printed where you simplify the halachas, and even the simple version has got a lot of details to it. But back in the day, it was the Rav's job on the Shabbos and God the Drosha to teach the halachas that everybody should know. With the availability of so much information today.
Rabbi,
Go ahead.
A few years ago, right? I mean, I've been involved with this for a lot longer than yourself. And I remember a story, and I'll repeat this quite loud. My late father, Shalom, ran a greengrocery, and he sold Pesach items to our Jewish brethren because they wanted it. So he used to get it for them. He wasn't making money on it. He just did it because it was helping them out. One year, the tea arrived, or the sugar arrived, and the labels hadn't arrived. So he spoke to the local Beth Din. He said, "What do we do?" He says, "When the labels arrive, put them on yourself. Right? Put them on yourself, the labels." Now, I'm not being cynical, Rabbi, but when it comes to Pesach, I've got a very, very simple solution to all this. You've got to keep in with your own missus, right, as much as you can. It gets very complicated, and it's put me into very, very, very difficult situations at home. Unbelievable. I tell you, Rabbi, I've had to literally put my whatever on my line to do all this. And you do, and thankfully, I know you're diplomatic, and our Rav is very diplomatic because he gave us the thing I said. You've got to do what you think is best, because if we go back to the times in the 1940s and we go what happened both in the UK and in Europe, they did what we can do. My view is very, very simple. You do it in the spirit of what your family can cope with, right? Because I have various levels in our household and in the wider community. Like this year, I've just been making a Pesach list my own self because I want to do some slight improvements where I can. Within what we can possibly, it's so difficult. Every household, including the very from household, they will have arguments and this, that, and the other. But if we drive ourselves mad on it, Rabbi, we'll end up, the beautiful of Pesach becomes a nightmare. And you've got to try and make it in such a way that you can cover things. Like Shabbos is a very complicated set of laws. And to try and meet my missus in the middle of all this is not as easy. And I've had to understand the laws the way I've been brought up to it without compromising and stuff like that. And I hope you guys, I know you be, but in some schools, they drive their congregations round the bend. And it's not fair because you go home and then the kids get upset because the parents are squabbling over it. It really is. Pesach should be a brilliant time to enjoy it around the Seder, get the family, get your friends around and really enjoy it without going on to the minute parts about the homage. Should it be in this room or not in this room? It gets crazy, Rabbi. Totally, utterly mishuggy. And I do things which I think are totally crazy. I'm doing it because I think it's right, but I've got to also be mindful of what my family think of. And I would say that to the Beth Din, I'll say that to the Belts community, I'll say it to the Chabad. You've just got to do what you can do. And that is it. And that's my end of my share for this morning.
Don't go yet. Don't log off yet. Don't log off.
I'm not going. I'm loving it. I'm here for it. I'm just saying.
I just want to say I agree with Jeff and the many things that you said, but I'm going to ask you to do it exactly the same thing. Just frame it like this. You're not compromising on Pesach. You're doing the mitzvah of Simchas Yom Tov Behidor.
Absolutely.
You're being extra careful in the midst of Simchas Yom Tov. Of course, you've got to not compromise, but you've got to make sure that Simchas Yom Tov is a mitzvah deraisa. There's a rabbinical level of mitzvahs and the rabbinical level of mitzvahs. Eating your matzah on Seder night is top.
Yes,
telling the story of Pesach is top. You know what else is top?
Oh, well said, Jeff.
You know what else is top?
I know. Harmony with one's missus and family.
Yes, but make it even more than that. That's always top. On Seder night, there is still a top mitzvah on par with eating matzah is to be joyous.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
It's possibly
Yes.
more important than eating maror.
Yes,
Even
yes,
more important
absolutely.
than eating. It's
Yeah.
possibly more important than having 4 cups of wine. Could you imagine?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, apparently I heard a story. It's a bit of a joke. This year, you know what we say about the 10 plagues and we dip the fingers into it? We've had one more into it this year. Plague 11, COVID.
Is that the one in Eliyahu's cup? You tip your finger in Eliyahu's cup? No.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, it's very important though. I think what Jeff was saying is to make sure that you check with your rabbi and tell him what you can do, because sometimes we think that we heard in the shit it's so important and it's not. Equally, sometimes we think, I can compromise in this. And really, that's the one thing we shouldn't compromise in. So sometimes it makes sense just to run through text message, WhatsApp, this is what I'm going to do, just to discuss it. And sometimes you can think that things that you feel like you can't compromise on, it's absolutely fine to do a little less. But the other thing, sometimes it's worth putting the effort and dropping one thing and doing the other thing more. That's the Shabbos Haggadah. It's a big Shabbos. Why is it called a big Shabbos? It's called a big Shabbos because it marks a very special occasion. Interestingly, unlike most Yom Tovs on the Jewish calendar, which are marked on the calendar date, Shabbos Haggadah marks a big date on the week before Pesach, so it works according to the days of the week. There's a discussion in itself why we don't mark it on the 10th day of Nisan, which is when it should have taken place. But it marks a big day. And it's called the Big Shabbos because it marks a big occasion. There was a civil war that broke out amongst the Egyptians. No Jews involved. And the civil war was where you had the firstborns of the Egyptians fighting, you could call it, against their own leadership. Let the Jews free. Enough is enough. Now, of course, they had a motive in it because they knew they were on the line, and they all died a few days later. But before then, they were fighting on behalf of the Jewish people. And that in itself is a big move. Forget the motives, the message. In watching the firstborns of the enemy, and in those days, firstborn meant a big thing. Firstborn meant the future of the nation, because the firstborn of each family was the head of the family, was the heir to the family. And they stood up and fought, literally fought, put the lives on the line with a real civil war on behalf of the Jews. And we mark that as the beginning of the turnaround of where the enemy not only stops oppressing us, but starts arguing on our behalf. And that is obviously the context isn't so much the message, but the reality of what was taking place there is very much what we're looking at. And we mark that, we call it the Shabbos Haggadah, the Big Shabbos, and it becomes a day of marking where we have faith in the people. Not only in the people that are not hurting us, but even in people who look around and they may even be anti-Semites. They may even be terrible, but we learn that Hashem has a plan for every single human being. And it doesn't mean that they have to be wiped off the face of earth. It does mean that they do need education. We look around and there are many, many people who unfortunately could be categorized as anti-Semites in their behavior. And it boils down to a lack of education. Shabbos Haggadah is a day where we remind ourselves that there is hope. But not only there is hope, it is the destiny of every single human being. It's inevitable that it will turn around. Shabbos Haggadah. Redemption isn't only for those people who have behaved righteously. Redemption is for humanity, for Hashem's creation. Shabbos Haggadah. It's a big Shabbos. That's a game changer. It's a mind shift to have faith in people, even if they're behaving inappropriately. And it's their choices. But it's their choices based on their education or lack of education that they were brought up with. That's number one. And number two is, when it comes to this week before Shabbos Haggadah, 2 important things. We already spoke about reaching out to others, but we're going to talk about in 2 specific areas. Miftzah Matzah was the Matzah campaign. Traditionally, the rabbi of each shtetl would ensure that each shtetl member had matzah. Very often it would be the rabbi's job to provide the matzah. which is kosher Pesach, for each member of the community. Today, we don't expect rabbis to provide matzah, but we do try and make sure that anybody who doesn't have matzah should get. I'm saying it now, and I'm going to remind you again, if you know somebody who doesn't have access to handmade shmur matzah and wants and would appreciate it, please let me know, and we will make sure to get it to them. And the same goes for yourself. If you want the handmade shmur matzah, just message me, and we will have. It's very special matzah. It's the original makoy, but for Seder night, it's so important to have the handmade. It's a mitzvah to have matzah which is made with kavana, and if you're able to eat that matzah, it's not as easy as the machine-made matzah. If you're able to eat it, then it's a very good idea. And while we're at it, just a little bit of marketing here. Handmade shmur matzah tastes best when it's toasted. So if you have an oven that's on, you can't switch it on Pesach, whatever, on Yom Tov. If you have an oven that happens to be on or a stovetop, put it on for 5 minutes. Let me tell you, you've never tasted such delicious matzah.
I just wonder, does it taste that bad?
It tastes much better than you can imagine. But the mitzvah, eating matzah shouldn't be eaten only because it tastes good. Really, the reason we eat matzah is because it's a mitzvah. So that's another important thing, eating with the right intention. But that's number one, matzah campaign. And the other one is selling your chametz. Selling chametz.
Rabbi, what's the shtetl?
One more time.
What you said shtetl or something. What was that? Sorry, I didn't understand.
Dayton?
Shtetl, or what did you say? Something in English, maybe.
Shtetl. Shtetl is in the Haim. The shtetl life was back in Eastern Europe. In the shtetl is the towns, the villages of where the Yiddish people used to live.
Ah. Okay.
In the shtetl, back in the day, the rabbi of the shtetl would make sure everyone has matzah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so nowadays, even if we're not in the little Eastern European villages, we can still make sure everyone has matzah. We should do more, not less. Baruch Hashem, we've been blessed. We live in a life of abundance. Even those of us who don't have more than the shtetl people had. But 1 second, the other thing is selling the chametz. If a person sells the chametz, then all the chametz that is in their possession does not belong to them. For Pesach, it costs them nothing. But the difference is enormous, because one who does not sell their chametz over Pesach, even after Pesach, and in a half a year from now, the chametz that was owned by a Jewish person over Pesach is forbidden for consumption. We shouldn't even sell it. If someone owned a bottle of whiskey and they didn't sell it over Pesach, the whiskey should be poured down the drain, even not given to a non-Jew. That's how serious it is. But all it takes is to sign a form, and the rabbi sells it on our behalf. It's a legally binding form. And in theory, the non-Jew who buys the chametz could, in theory, knock on your door in the middle of Pesach and says, "I'd like that whiskey." And he'd have to pay you for it after Pesach. But until he doesn't, and they don't, it's not owned by us. Which means that after Pesach, it's perfectly permissible. And it's really important to encourage people, first of all, not to be afraid to sell the chametz, but also not to, we'll get that sorted. But it's so important, so easy, and also it's important not to forget to actually sell the chametz. So, selling the chametz.
Would you say, sorry, quick question, would you say you're actually allowed to sell bread, actual bread?
Yes.
So you've got a lot of bread in the freezer or something.
Yes, but it has to be marked off in a cupboard. So if it's in the freezer, it would have to be a box that's sealed so that you don't by mistake touch it. But also it's clearly visible that it's not yours. Meaning it's not.
Right. What you can do is what we've done, fortunately, we have a separate freezer.
Boom.
Which is,
Ah.
I mean, we were lucky a few years ago when we had a couple. Yeah. We got a separate freezer.
In the freezer that's covered with a piece of paper, easzy. And you just write sold, you cover a piece of paper. Sometimes you go to shul and you can see certain doors have a sign in it that says sold for Pesach. In other words, there's two things going on. Number one is you're not going to make a mistake and touch it over Pesach. And number two, it's clearly indicated if the non-Jew were to come into the house and say, "Please, can I have my chametz?" he would know exactly where to go. And say, "Yeah, that shelf is yours." In other words, it's clearly marked that it's his. But
because I'm quite worried about it, I must say. I've never done it because it's actually classed as chametz gamur.
Correct.
So I've never done that before. But I was wondering why all that bread that I've got, I don't want to really, I don't know. It's like, wow, isn't it a shame to just throw it all away kind of thing?
Yeah.
It's,
Correct.
Rabbi, can I ask a hypothetical question?
Please.
You imagine it came sort of Erev Pesach and you hadn't yet, I mean, it doesn't happen to us, hadn't sold your chametz yet, but your neighbor next door was non-Jewish, could you actually make a form out and sell it to your neighbor if you knew him that well, your chametz?
So the two things. Number one is when the cutoff time comes and you own it after the cutoff time, it becomes a whole massive problem because the Torah tells us that on Pesach, the chametz belongs to us and does not belong to us. In other words, it belongs to us only to be a problem, but it's not ours to sell. The only other comparison we have to that in the entire Torah, where something belongs to us only as a liability and not as a real ownership, is if someone leaves a hazard in the public domain. Let's say I drop something on the pavement. The Torah tells us that stuff that's mine on the pavement, I say, oh, I don't want to own it. I don't need it anymore. I'm leaving my banana peel on the pavement. The Torah says the banana peel is not mine. So if I want to take it back and say, you know what, somebody else is collecting banana peels, I tell them, no, it's mine. It's not mine. But if someone slips on it, the liability is mine. Because it's in the public domain, making it ownerless is not mine except for the liability. And the same with Pesach. If I own chametz past the time, it's only mine as a liability. And the only thing I can do is literally destroy it by flushing it down the toilet, burning it, whatever it is. But selling it to your neighbor could work. The only thing is it has to be a very real sale. When it comes to the based and selling the chametz, what they use is an R of Kablan. In other words, they make the sale so legally binding that although it might look like a joke because people have just clicked online, it really has the greatest weight of legal law in both in secular English law, British law, and in halachic law. It's like one of the firmest sales you can make, and it's really binding. If I go to my neighbor and he's laughing and I'm laughing, it probably doesn't work because we don't really believe that it's a real sale, in which case it's not good enough because it's not really a sale. It has to be a real binding sale. But yeah, it could work. Like especially if you put it in his house and he owns it, and in theory he could drink it, and you'll have nothing. You couldn't complain to him if he did. Then yeah, it would work. Okay.
I had a story. I won't say who it came from, and he arranged for everybody else to get the chametz sold, and he hadn't sold his chametz, and he had a load of new given to him, some really good whiskey, top of the range, I believe. He was telling us all, and he had to literally put it down the drain. And I said, why? And I said to myself, why couldn't he just give it to his neighbor who was Jewish? I don't know what I would have done that. I mean, it was just all that whiskey down the drain.
What a waste.
It's funny how people get so worked up about the whiskey. What about the time that we waste? Oh, you give out all that time down the drain. Yeah, but you're absolutely right. It is a small little thing that's worth remembering, reminding people, please don't have rubbish. Sorry. Have something healthy. Okay?
So sorry, Rabbi, what's the main point? Because if it's not really ours, how is the Beddin or the rabbis able to sell it binding?
So that there are different kinyanim, different acquisitionary ways that you can sell something. Sometimes it's just an agreement, and we're handing over a kinyan, then it works. But that is assuming that both parties are fully engaged. Both parties are fully interested in the sale. When there are certain ways of kinyanim which are even more effective than just handing over an item or hagba'ah or something like that. And the way they use it is a kinyan al yedei arav kablan, where they have a guarantor, and the guarantor is not only a guarantor for the money, but the guarantor is the prime payer. In other words, that the sale has gone through even if the non-Jew never pays up.
Another question for you, right? Okay, we're in the modern times now, but say we go back, say, 17th, 16th century, in the Stettles, Steebles, what you like, people weren't as articulate as today. In other words, we can write out, we can email, we can use any form of documentation. But in those days, a lot of people couldn't even read or write. So what's the answer to that one?
It's amazing that there were for many years, people, like Asher said, didn't sell real bread. They didn't. They would sell things that are like non-Pesach pots, but even then they weren't selling them because they would cash them. They couldn't afford to have two sets, a Pesach and not Pesach. So the sale of chametz was much less common, but there were still sale of chametz, and for many years it wasn't, as we just described, with the Orav Kablan, which is extremely binding, and which is why it was frowned upon in many circles. In many circles, it happens to be that the Manchester Basin is one of the earliest places here in the UK that started using this Orav Kablan. I don't remember which Dayan it was. Maybe Dayan Posner. I don't remember what his name is, but he decided to go this way, and this has now become much more mainstream. But yeah, it's true. Even if the guy doesn't read, if he has the documents in his hand, then he has the rights to it, even if he can't read. So although the non-Jewish buyer doesn't understand the weight of the deal, but the bottom line is, by signing on the dotted lines, he owns it.
But Rabbi, a question. Now then, right, say I sell my comments like to somebody, and then they decide they don't want to sell it back to me. Am I, let's use it, am I then pinching it?
Yes, very important, very true. Absolutely, and that's why the Basin are very careful who they take. They are very careful to take. But not only that, the guy who buys it doesn't just buy it. He gets himself all sorts of gifts. They're very nice to this guy, because if he turns around after Pesach, they're going to have a real problem. So they make sure they keep the guy well oiled. And a bottle of whiskey is just an understatement. Yeah, but they make sure they look after him so that he will work with them after Pesach 100%. If the guy doesn't show up after Pesach, meaning if the guy's drunk in the bar and nobody knows where he is, we can't use the chametz after Pesach. There's no automatic cancellation of the sale. It's a sale sold and it's a sale bought back. There's no automation in it, because if there was, then it's not a real sale. And if it's not a real sale, it didn't really belong to him, in which case you can't have your whiskey after Pesach. So yes, you got to make sure the guy is available the minute Pesach is over, so that the Basin can immediately buy it back, so that right after Pesach, they ask you to leave in an hour.
Another question for you. What happens if he passes away or becomes very ill or gets COVID or something, he's in hospital?
You've got a serious problem. You've got a real serious problem. You then have to deal with the heirs.
Whoever. Right. I'm sure they must have that in place. I'm sure they must have all these.
Absolutely. They don't go for people. They don't look for an old guy who's on his, but even though they never know what's coming and going. 100%. Yes, very important. But selling your chametz, we don't actually sell our chametz. We empower the Basin to sell it on our behalf. And in other words, the Basin is our agent. But it's a real, when you click that button, I'm telling you, it's a real sale. So, but it's worth it, because the other option is to not sell, and then you've got to pour your whiskey down the drain, God forbid. Okay.
And if we don't sell our comments, I'm just simply say put it all in the garage, for instance, right? Yeah. It's not going to be used, but we've not sold it.
Doesn't help. You put it in the garage and then sell the garage. Sell all the comments in the garage.
Right.
All right, another question for Rabbi. I love all this. Here's one for you. So it comes to Pesach, right? You sold your chametz, but you're a sort of a very secular whatever. You think, right, okay, I'm halfway through Pesach. So he goes out and he buys a non-chametz item, right? A non-Pesach item. I don't know, something which has not got the hesher. I don't know, for whatever reason. I'm not going to go. What happens then? Is the owner the person who's bought it after the date he sold it, or is it still the ownership of the contract?
The answer is, if you buy it after the sale, it's not included in the sale.
Yeah, I thought so.
Yeah, so definitely don't buy stuff that is not kosher Pesach. Although, having said that, if you bought sugar, chances are it's kosher Pesach even without the hechsher. But if you bought yourself something that was made in a factory, like even crisps or even pickles, they use stuff in it and you don't know what ingredients they've used, it could actually be a serious problem. It's not a bigger problem as buying biscuits, because that's straight up chametz, but even stuff that's manufactured, it is quite serious. Some things you don't need to have a hechsher on your water. Even though they're selling hechshered water in the shops, you really don't need that. You can open your tap and drink water. But when you're going to buy things, just remember, nowadays, the amount of ingredients which are in one piece of crisps, the amount of sub-ingredients, the amount of factories that have come together to make this, there is quite a lot of concern. Even the packing part of it. Sometimes it's not a non-issue, but sometimes, at least expected, even canned food.
Yeah. Rabbi, can I just say, I've worked as an observer in these factories, not as going as a showman, but my previous role in education and training. I used to go to companies that manufactured food, like Vitters, United Biscuits, Allied Bakeries, and all that. I've been there on the whole lot. All right, the bakeries we can't come in, but there's places where they manufacture like sugar and coffee and tea. We can't even get a germ. I mean, even before I went on site, I would have to sign a document saying, have I been abroad? Have I got this, a problem, that problem? It's so strict in the UK hygiene. It's unbelievable. So there is a sort of rise about what is classification like things like non-processed food like tea and sugar. So I'm not gonna go explain how it works out, but I know Jeff Radiman knows he's been in a factory. I don't need to have the best in telling me that certain items are so they are so germ-free. It's just, I can walk around until a hairnet on and a mask on. I can't walk around. In some places you have to wear gloves and everything else. So we have this discussion every year at the Seder table with my family, and I have to hold my hands up and saying, you're right. There's certain things which we know don't actually need a hesher on it. And I know this year the Rav sent out a letter with some document saying which things, if you can't get out there because you are isolating, you can have instead. You know what I mean? So this is where we become back to the contract again. Is if you're saying that it has to be sold because it's chametz, what is chametz? We know bread is chametz, we know rice is chametz, but when you've got sugar and tea, rice that is where,
rice and chametz. Jeff, you're absolutely right. Just rice and chametz. Rice, rice is Ashkenaz, but
don't get me down with that, Rabbi. Don't get me down. I hope my wife got to hear that one because that is a complicated one. Yeah.
You know what? I'm not really sure what we should do. I wanted to mention two other things. Neville, go ahead.
Well, Jeff's touched on obviously the principal point of, what did people do 1,000 years ago? Yeah, when they're celebrating Pesach, because obviously they didn't have the same Beth Din or the same amount of rabbis that we have now telling us what not to do. Yeah. Exactly. So there are a measure of fundamental things and add-on things, and obviously, it's got more. The rules have been, hyped every year. So what's happening is people these days, if they look at it and take it on its merit, they can't see the wood from the trees. Yeah, and yet, and that sort of thing. And Jeff's alluding to it, that, has created this structure, hyperstructure that's just increased costs and made it difficult for people who are marginal with this to get involved because it becomes too expensive.
I want to suggest two things. Exactly. I think Neville's asking, if Moshe Rabbeinu came to our Pesach, would he recognize Pesach? I think that's Neville's question. It's a good question. However, I do want to say two things. Number one is, it's unwinding a little bit. There's much more emphasis today of rabbis who are making it their work, their job, to explain to people what is a must and what is a bonus. We're not saying anything is bad. If someone wants to have a hechsher on the water, gesundheit, no problem. Have water with a hechsher, I don't mind.
Soft drinks are kosher for Pesach, soft drinks.
So I want to tell you that soft drinks is a real issue, especially diet. Diet drinks are also a very big issue, especially for Ashkenazim. But yeah, having soft drinks hechsher makes sense. But water is a bonus. It's not a bad thing. It's just not mandatory. But that's number one. Rabbis are making a bigger effort to explain to people. Go, Neville. Go ahead.
I mean, even in the Goldman family, 7 Carlton Avenue, we've made a decision, and we've never made this decision for 31 years. We're not having any lemonade and Coke. It's too expensive.
It's also not so healthy. But I want to say something else. I want to tell you that there is besides from Moshe Rabbeinu not recognizing Pesach because there are a lot of stringencies that have developed over the year. If you walk around your kitchen this week or next week and ask yourself which one of these foods were available 1,000 years ago,
Probably none of them.
None.
well, the matzah was available.
Yeah.
The chicken was available. Your veg was available.
What about salt?
Salt was available. Maybe not the same form, but there was salt. But all your manufactured goods have brought a lot of abundance, but come with their own set of questions. And that's where the complications come in.
Yeah.
Though it's true, Moshe wouldn't recognize all the stringencies, but that's because we have new scenarios that were not around back then. So putting these into perspective, number one, there are bonuses that we don't have to get caught on. And I think today rabbis are making a very big deal out of highlighting what is a must and what is a bonus. But the other thing is to recognize that we do have new questions that need new stringencies. Go ahead, Neville.
If Moses was in Prestwich and Broughton, he'd go Meshuggah. He said, "You lot are too from," and he'd go to Israel for Passover.
Yeah, just what on Neville's thought, Rabbi. There's something else which is quite serious for us here in this group. Probably we are, at least I know myself, are very comfortable, so we can afford to go and buy nice items. But there's a lot of brethren, both in the from community and the secular community, who are not. Right, we're doing the appeals you do every year. How can you? And also, you want to encourage the non-from people to keep it when they say, "Why can't I can't afford it?" Because my wife showed me the bill what she spent just on a few items because we have homemade stuff in our house. And, all right, it's not a big deal. We can afford it, but it's a lot of money. Few £100 here and there. Yeah. To some families, it is a lot of money, and you want to, as I said right at the beginning of my discussion with you guys, where I love the brilliant discussion, is to encourage and to enjoy Pesach. But they're making it. I mean, it's a big commercial. Look, Habers and Halpens and the rest of them are making a fortune out of this. It's just crazy.
The point is,
it's very expensive.
It is expensive.
The point
when
is
you compare it to the non-kosher, it's nearly double sometime on certain nights.
Yeah.
Why does Hechsher make it so much more?
There is. They can explain to you why the price is more, and it would make sense. But the bottom line is, as you say, for a lot of people, it's not affordable. For in our family, Baruch Hashem, we've been blessed that our tradition is we don't use manufactured goods. Oh boy, let me tell you. Raw food, it's much cheaper than even buying a packet of crisps. Could you imagine? Yeah. We don't use manufactured goods, with very few exceptions. We buy wine. But other than that, it's all fresh vegetables, fresh fruits, and all raw material. We make it at home. It doesn't get that expensive compared
to... That's the way to do it. That's the way to do it. You're living healthy. That's what we do.
But you're absolutely right. The questions are better than the answers. I just want to say, if you're thinking about making a donation to the food bank, last night, today, and tomorrow, the food bank is literally, as you say, I think there's 250 families that are coming in a dignified way, and it's not simple. You got to imagine that each one of these families, as Jeff just pointed out, it's not affordable. And they want to have Simchas Yom Tov. It's a mitzvah. We said it's in the Torah. It's one of the top mitzvahs to make sure there's a joyous Yom Tov. What are they going to do when the kid's friend is having all this, that, and the other, chocolates, and it costs a fortune, and they can't afford? What are they going to do? So this is the idea. The idea is we don't know the answer, but in the meantime, we try and make it work. We try and help out one another. So we said matzah. We said selling chametz. And now we're saying supporting those who need a little bit of help to be able to get ready for Pesach. And we did mention in the beginning, learning and discussing the laws of Pesach, especially when it falls on Shabbos. When does the sale of chametz go into effect? Friday afternoon. When do we have to stop eating chametz? On 10 o'clock on Shabbos morning. And we should be careful to keep out certain amount of chametz that's not included in the sale to the non-Jew. And that's the chametz that we're going to eat for Pesach. Sorry, not for Pesach, for Shabbat before Pesach. That was a bad one. But everything else has to be sold, and we have to designate what's not included in the sale. Because we can't say, oh, whatever I leave over, I'll give back to the non-Jew. Because that's selling on Shabbos, which isn't allowed. And the sale's already gone into effect. So we should think a little bit, how much should we eat? Not over leave, so we shouldn't be left over with chametz that we need to destroy on Shabbos, which means literally breaking it into crumbs and flushing down the toilet, or you can't give it away.
That's terrible. So I was thinking pita bread. Hamotzi pita bread, less crumbs.
The best, but just make sure you know how much pita you need for Shabbos. Don't leave too many, because if you do, you'll have a lot of eating to do.
Yes, but Rabbi,
and then we have
query.
Go ahead.
Right. On Shabbos morning, we've got to have finished say breakfast, bread or anything by about 10 o'clock.
Right.
Right. But you can't eat matzah then until you have Seder at night.
Correct.
Correct. So I've got to go, say, from 10 o'clock in the morning till what time ever we start eating at night.
7:30.
All right. Okay. 7:30. Well, that's when we actually start the Seder, isn't it? So
correct.
Another hour. Right. So I can eat vegetables, I can eat literally anything, but can't eat matzah. But what about, say, matzah crackers?
No.
You can't eat those either.
No.
Correct.
Rabbi, there's an issue because I'm diabetic, and it can be affected. I have to have some carbohydrates in the day. I think my wife has something sorted out like baked potatoes, stuff like that. But yeah, bananas. But it has been, even without Shabbos during the year, I need to have my carbohydrates in the day because otherwise sugar levels just go right down. And as I'm stressed as it pre-Shabbos, it makes it even worse, and it has been an issue. I don't try to use a diabetic card to eat matzah, far from it, but you've got to find food to eat like bananas and other bits and pieces. The cereals are awful, so I won't touch them. They're absolutely awful, the cereals. So they're banned from my house.
They're not based
They are banned from our house, the cereals, the Pesach cereals. The tray for as far as we're concerned.
We're racing against the clock. Forget the share. Yeah. There's one more interesting and very important set of halachas that's often, there's so much to talk about, we miss out, and that's, I really want to make a big deal out of it today, and that is the laws of Chol HaMoed, intermediate days of Pesach. It's tricky, because Shabbos, the day before Pesach, Sunday, Monday is Yom Tov. The next Shabbos and Sunday is Yom Tov. But all the days in between are intermediate days. They're called Chol HaMoed because, in theory, we're allowed to do a lot of things that we can't do on Yom Tov. However, very important to remember, we are not allowed to schedule stuff to do on Chol HaMoed that we shouldn't be doing if it was Yom Tov. For example, if you have house decoration or schlepping work, don't do it in Chol HaMoed. Chol HaMoed is a time where almost all the things we think we're going to do, it's any hour Chol HaMoed, we shouldn't be doing. In many circles, we don't even write on Chol HaMoed. We certainly don't do things that are laborious on Chol HaMoed. It's a Yom Tov. The only thing is you're allowed to drive, you're allowed to make your phone calls, you're allowed to go out and do things, fun things, but it has to be in the spirit of a festival. It's very important to remember that. Chol HaMoed is a moed. Moed means Yom Tov. It means a festival. And there are certain things that we're allowed to do. And the same thing is true with shopping. One shouldn't even go shopping on Yom Tov unless it's for Yom Tov itself. Like if you need to have more food or you need to get something for Yom Tov, so maybe you could go. But in theory, it should be a time where it's designated to, we're not going to work. If you have to go to work, because whatever it is, and it's have some aruba, so then a certain circumstance you have to go. But you bear in mind, you're going to work because you have no other option, but not because it's the ideal. That sort of approach helps us realize that Chol HaMoed is actually part of Pesach. Not just because you're eating matzah, but because it's the celebration. There's a minhag to drink a cup of wine every day of Chol HaMoed. We don't make Kiddush, no. We don't make Kiddush, gorgeous. Kiddush is included in a cup of wine. We should have a drink of wine for males. For women, you should do something nice for yourself every day to make sure that it's a celebration. Why would you drink a cup of wine every day? Because we have to teach ourselves that Chol HaMoed, it's an intermediate day, and you could drive, you can make a phone call, no problem, but that's because it's part of the celebration. Not because it's a non-important day. It's really important. And there's a full book called The Laws of Chol Hamoed, if you want to get into the full, as we discussed before. The basic idea is the Chol Hamoed is not a regular day. It's Pesach. It's a Yom Tov. It's a Yom Tov that you're allowed to drive on. It's a Yom Tov that you're allowed to do certain things you couldn't do on a regular day. Just like Yom Tov, you're allowed to cook. Even though it's Shabbos, you're not allowed to cook. But Yom Tov is a special day. Every day of Pesach is a special day. And even for those people who, for quite often, there are people who have to go to work on Chol Hamoed because otherwise they'll lose their job, or it's not possible for them to, whatever it is. They have to remind themselves that that's like the exception. It's what we do because we have no other option, but it's not what how you frame the day. Chol Hamoed is a very special time, and it's each day we should do something extra. And if you're looking for things to do extra, of course, you should make sure it's a celebrationary day, but also to do an extra bit of learning every day. Make time on that time. If you could do it with your family, find something that would be of interest to family members, that's even better. And that often does mean don't open a Chumash or a Gemara or a Mishnayos. Find a topic that's relatable. That's something that you can connect with. And you designate a certain time, maybe it's 20 minutes, I don't know, after dinner or at the dinner table or in the morning, wherever it is. We designate a time where we're going to explore a topic. There's 4 or 5 days of Chol Hamoed. Friday, I don't know if you can count it because it's Erev Yom Tov, whatever it is. And we're going to do something because it's Yom Tov Dik. And we're going to do something to celebrate our neshama. And it's festival. We sit down as Jewish people. We are people who have a neshama. We're going to celebrate that neshama. And we're going to do something meaningful on that day. It's Yom Tov. Okay, we can do little things. It's Chol Hamoed. Chol means weekday Yom Tov. But it's a Yom Tov all the same. It's very important. So I want to make an emphasis about that. Oftentimes, we don't even get a chance to hear about Chol Hamoed. We're so sedered out. We've been bombarded with so many halachas getting ready for Pesach and the Seder nights and the matzah, and we forget that Chol Hamoed is a special day. It's really special. It's a day to celebrate. It should be much more relaxed. There's not much to do compared to Seder nights, but it's finally time you can breathe. And if you compare it to the Seder story, there was slavery, and then we were freedom. The lead up to Pesach can be looked at. There's so much to do. We're being hammered and it's such hard work. Finally, we should relax and enjoy the holiness. And we said the holiness can mean the godliness of the day. To think of Pesach as a holy day. That's what we call the holiday, right? Because there's holiness in it. And that holiness should be enjoyed, should be appreciated. Not just that we don't go to work. That's passive. That's like almost not what we do not do. We do not go to work, or we do not have all these things. But what do we yes do? What is the positive yesness of Pesach? And the answer is we're enjoying it. We're living the moment. We're celebrating the fact that we became a people, the birth of our nation. We're free to be able to do the things that we really should be doing. What should we really be doing? Expressing, actualizing our own self. And our own self is to be able to do mitzvahs, to be able to learn Torah, to find meaning in every moment of our day, in every day of our life. One more highlight before we close, and that is on the last day of Pesach, which is going to be a week on Sunday. 2 weeks today. 2 weeks today, we have the last day of Pesach is the Mashiach Suda. I'll probably send out an email, but you can just remind yourself, it's a time where we want to celebrate not just the past, not just our history, we celebrate the future. We sit down and we have what would be like on Shabbos, is Shabbos Shudas. This year it's on a Sunday afternoon, and we sit down and we celebrate the time of Mashiach. We have extra 4 cups of wine or grape juice. We eat matzah. We sing songs. And we encourage each other just before Pesach closes. These are little pointers that I wanted to discuss, bring up. If you have any questions, please do ask. It's already 10:30. I want to wish everybody a very heilige, kosher, and joyous Pesach. Again, if you or someone you know needs Hamed Shmura, some of us have already reached out. We're going to sort it out, Be'ez Hashem. Celebrate Pesach. Don't forget to sell your chametz. Make sure that you celebrate, and it's the mitzvah of joy on Pesach as well. Make it a special time, and Hashem should warn us that we should have cherus amiti, true freedom from our own self-imposed hardships, and the hardship that Hashem has imposed on us. We should have the geula b'heri yameinu. Let's do a quick birchas kohanim. Dabal Adam Bal Name Kisvorks Benisor Lahem Yivorecha the name Shmenecha Yair Adine Panim Velech Vichoneka Yisadine Panim Velech Visemcha Shalom Sam Shmia Ben Yisol Vania Barchim. A very wonderful Pesach all.
Thank you. I will send
much.
Jacob.
Bye, Rabbi.
Great
Thank
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thoroughly enjoyed this
Bye.
morning.
Bye.
Thank you, Levi.
Absolutely. Oh, Yaina, how are you?
I don't know. This session was very interactive. I thought we didn't let you speak. I'm sorry.
Not at all. Yaina, I was hoping you've got some questions.
I don't know. To me, maybe I'm overwhelmed with the technicalities, despite my academic background. I just, I don't know. I don't see the point in so much detail at this particular moment. So I think Jeff has a lot of truth in what he was saying. So do little by little, whatever works for the family, try to make it work.
Absolutely.
And,
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes. Don't go crazy. So probably I will find some good videos, watch and do what I can do. But yes, going crazy and looking at the clock, what you can do, what you cannot do, and worry and tremble about every single crumb. No, I'm sorry.
Don't worry about it. Just do what you can do. That's it. I mean, however,
I do that with some on my
Please
own.
don't tremble.
Do what I can do.
listen, you can't, otherwise you end up going mental. You can't.
Okay,
Right.
okay.
Rabbi,
Yeah,
I'll speak to you in a week. Bye. Take care. All the best.
Take care. Bye
Right,
bye.
all the best. All the best to you as well. Yeah.
Happy Pesach. Enjoy.
Everybody.
Maybe will we have a lesson on Tuesday?
Let's aim for it. Let's aim for a message in the
Okay.
morning.
Yes. Thank you very
Okay.
much. Thank you.
A wonderful week, everybody.